more of a man. This cold, which I am now finally getting over, has left me feeling all weak and unmanly again. I hate this. Before I got this illness I was feeling confident about myself. But now when I look in the mirror, all I see is a less than a man, a weakling, a girl, a fag. I've really got to get back into the swing of my reparative therapy, which is, of course, designed to help me feel more confident about myself and feel like I'm more of a mature young man. So anyways, I've asked my brother to play football with me tomorrow. I used to have a morbid fear of playing football and mixing with the rough lads, so whenever I conquer that fear I feel absolutely fantastic, and my inner sense of manhood gets a little encouragement. I can't wait to play again. Actually, when I was gay I loathed football, along with the ignorance of the players and supporters, and their macho attitude. However, now I can really appreciate it and find it to be a whole lot of fun. I never thought I'd say this, but I really love playing football. Following a specific team is another matter. I can't quite understand the appeal of that yet. But, regardless, these manly activities really have broken down my resistance to identifying with other men. I don't view other guys as merely stupid or ugly, while putting other men on a pedestal of perfection. I no longer keep quiet, but I try to get involved. Such things really do help me feel like I'm one of the guys, and those guys whom I used to admire as perfection itself are no longer as mysterious, or as sexually attractive. Being held. I remember when I first started therapy wondering about the feelings of being held at night. Like, when going to sleep at night I used to imagine being held by another man. I knew that if I was to develop further heterosexuality, that feeling would eventually change. Eventually I knew that I would have to feel like I want to hold, not be held, but want to hold a girl. The problem was that at the time I couldn't possibly imagine why I would ever want to hold someone else, particularly a girl. Being held by a guy was the only thing that made sense, anything the other way around was just strange. Now, however, the tables have turned. I cannot imagine why I would ever want to be held at all. Holding someone else, a girl, seems like the natural instinct. Also, occasionally when sleepy, I'll go back to old habits and begin to imagine that I'm being held by a guy. But then it suddenly feels very weird and, imagining the guy is lying next to me, I push myself away feeling somewhat embarrassed, shake the guy's hand, say hello, you alright, mate, and end up having a ridiculous fantasy that I'm just talking to an ordinary bloke about mundane matters. When you realize that sex just isn't what you really want, the foundations of SSA just give way and the whole construction collapses. Sex with another man is a way of bypassing all of the uncomfortable things like talking, activities, identification, work, etc. that normally draws you close to other males. Instead of gaining affirmation and intimacy through these normal channels, you can bypass them and go straight for the most intimate place, the groin, and absorb the other person's masculinity into yourself, without the petty need for authentically getting to know the man in healthy non-sexual ways. So when the sex is over, you're still just as detached and unfamiliar with the other man, and all men, as you were to begin with. The sexual intimacy is an illusion and can never satisfy what you really want, affirmation, companionship, and identification with the world of real men. Conversely, gaining that affirmation, companionship, and identification with real men has the opposite effect. You no longer need to take the short route straight to sex, because you've already got what you want. So the sex becomes superfluous and entirely unappealing. I told my best buddy. Okay, major development for me today. I just told my best, ever straight, buddy in the whole world about my SSA, and my therapy. I went out with him tonight for a drink, something to eat, etc., listen to a band in a pub, and just have a chat. Before I had to drop him back off home, I decided that I wanted to tell him about my SSA, therapy, etc. It must have taken me well over an hour before I finally got to telling him. I first explained to him that I'd been undergoing a very controversial form of therapy for something. I then explained in a vague fashion what it did to me, and how it had benefited me, and how lucky I was for it to work for me so well. I kept saying to him, it's very important that you understand that it's no longer an issue for me, which perplexed him more and more, since I was withholding what the therapy was actually for. Eventually I told him in a way that he could work it out himself. I said, the therapy I've been telling you about is used to treat something we call SSA. He tried guessing what it meant, and after several rather amusing guesses, I gave him an even bigger hint. The idea is to replace the SSA with what we call OSA. The O stands for opposite. He then guessed that OSA stood for opposite sex something, and I told him he was on the right track. This may sound all very contrived and ridiculous, but this guy is a great friend and I just couldn't tell him outright. I then told him the OSA stands for opposite sex attraction. He then leaned back, rubbed his eyes as if in deep thought, and then it suddenly dawned on him what SSA stood for. After a nervous chuckle from him, I asked him, "Hey, so you've worked it out then?" "Yes," he replied, with a rather strained voice. He then went on to say, "I think I understand now," after which he listed a few things which he had thought might mean I was gay. I confirmed that each of the things he mentioned was, indeed, a symptom of my past SSA, which recently had changed. Phew! I had finally told him. Now, of course, I was worried about his reaction. I mean, will he want to speak to me again? Will he act strangely around me? I trust this guy very much, and I didn't think he would stop speaking to me. So, what was his reaction? He seemed to be all right about it. In fact, he seemed a little bemused by the whole thing. Before I dropped him off back at his house, he told me to call him on Sunday if I fancied going anywhere, and since I got back home we've exchanged a couple of amusing text messages with him. He reckons that I need to find a girl with big TTS. Smiley face, if only it were that simple. But what matters is that he's okay with it. So, mission accomplished, and it seems to have gone well. The most important factor, however, is that I told him for the right reasons. I didn't do it to draw him closer to me, or to try and get him to love me or care for me. I don't need that. The reason I did it, and I believe this agrees with what I've read by reparative therapists, is to just be more honest, authentic, and comfortable with my friend. After all, he's my best friend and he's stuck by me before. He should still accept me when he learns more about me. So, right now I feel great. It's a huge relief to actually be open and honest to him for the first time. Now I can ask him all those silly and awkward questions about what it's like to be straight without him wondering what the hell I'm asking for. And again, this must be what it feels like to come out of the closet. Well, not really. I told another friend of mine yesterday, you see. This means that both of my ever-straight best buddies know about my past SSA problems, and my current reparative therapy. This friend seemed to take it even better than my other friend. I wasn't surprised though, as he knows some gay homosexuals at college, and he is good friends with at least one in his class. So if he is comfortable at being around guys like that, well, I see no reason why he would suddenly reject as an ex-gay. He's been perfectly okay about it. In fact, he found it quite interesting that such therapies even exist. I thought he may have heard something about it in the news recently, but no, he hadn't. We then had a bit of a laugh about how his gay homosexual friends at college would react to hearing of such a thing. They'd go APE. So, anyways, we had a laugh and now he knows all about it. This is fantastic. Now I can be completely open and honest with them. I can ask them all sorts of stupid questions about heterosexuality without them wondering why on earth I'm asking such things. Actually, that's one of the things I explained to my friend last night. Remember when I asked you if it was normal to look at some lasses' chests before looking at their faces? Yeah, he replied. Well, this is why. Because this heterosexuality lark is all new to me. Ah, I see. That's true, actually. Eventually you start looking at girls in entirely new ways. The thing about the breasts, though, it's quite weird because even when I was first gaining some attractions to women, the breasts were not attractive. That particular appeal is a fairly recent thing. I'm not sure why, but for me it just didn't happen at first, and it's still not a very strong attraction. Although my recent progress is anything to go by, perhaps that will change. I don't think I'll be coming out to anyone else for a long while. Enough people know already. Marriage. One of my oldest friends is getting married soon. I'm very pleased for him and I think the girl he's marrying is very nice and well suited to him. I'm sure they'll be very happy. Now here comes the self-analysis. Until fairly recently, I hated the very idea of weddings and marriage. In fact, it would really annoy me when my male buddies would look for girls. It would make me feel left out. I would prefer them to not look for girls, and just forget about it. I certainly didn't like going to other people's weddings, regarding them as somehow stupid and annoying. I would very much resent it when male friends started paying all their attention to a girl or group of girls. I'd actually feel hurt. But there's a common thread running through all of that: self-pity. Yes, it's self-pity. For example, when I was among a bunch of male friends, and they start talking about girls and start looking for girls, I would feel left out. I wanted them to stop doing that. In effect, what did I really want? I wanted them to stop paying attention to girls and keep paying attention to me. Is that not so? It's not just a feeling of being left out, but also a feeling of jealousy. Stop talking about girls and start paying attention to poor little me who feels so left out and inferior. In effect, if I had my own way, I would keep them away from girls, marriage, etc., so I can have them all to myself. Is that not an entirely selfish and infantile way of thinking? Firmly rooted in the self-pity of wanting them to pay attention to poor little me? I think it is. I found a reference in Dr. Ardweg's book concerning what some homosexuals think of marriage. Some homosexuals view marriage and the male-female relationship without understanding, with envy and sometimes even hatred, because the role of manliness or womanliness itself annoys them. This is, in short, the view of an outsider who feels inferior. Battle for Normality, A Guide for Self-Therapy for Homosexuality by Dr. Gerard J. M. van den Aardwerg, page 67 paragraph 2. And as for wanting attention among a group of people, they want to be the most adored, the most loved boy of the group. They seldom feel on an equal footing with others. Battle for Normality, page 67 paragraph 3. Are these not the feelings I've described above? Anyway, with this realization, I've managed to keep my infantile self-pity and inner child under control. Instead of resenting my friend's marriage, I can be genuinely pleased for him. In fact, the feelings of being left out, jealousy, and hatred, have been replaced with another feeling, that of thinking how wonderful it would be if one day I, too, could find a nice girl and get married. For me, that's quite a remarkable milestone to have reached. Neo-defensive detachment. For those of you who know a little about reparative therapy, you'll know that one of the most common things among SSA guys is something called defensive detachment. I thought I had gotten over mine. Indeed, I have managed to conquer and break through most of it. However, a couple of days ago I met two guys whom I used to know when I was a teenager. One guy I used to have a crush on, and the other is a guy I used to feel helplessly inferior to. Anyway, I met both of these guys when they approached me just to say hello, and ask how I've been, etc. It was a short but pleasant conversation, we had a laugh, and it was good. But afterwards, it hit me, whoa. Suddenly I had strong feelings of hurt, offense, and most of all, rejection. These feelings hit me like a ton of bricks, and I continued to feel that way for the next day or so. Along with these feelings I would feel anxious, with an upset stomach, and tenseness in my arms and legs. Why I felt this way isn't a mystery. I've been through it already with my therapist. To explain it, I'll have to tell you a bit of background first. You see, when I was a teenager I matured very quickly. For this reason I didn't want to hang around with kids my own age. Instead, I wanted to hang around with the older kids. Unfortunately, no matter how hard I tried, I always seemed to be rejected by them. This feeling of rejection was exacerbated by the fact I had a crush on one of those guys. After that experience, I developed a very bad defensive detachment. Very bad. Rejecting, and at times, being nasty, to others before they could reject me. So it seems that when I met those two guys a couple of days ago, all of that started flooding back. I expected rejection. I expected them to make me feel inferior all over again. Of course, they didn't do anything to make me feel rejected or inferior. In fact, they were very nice. The problem was with me, I was expecting rejection and I made myself feel it. The upset stomach and tense ligaments are all symptoms of anxiety, as if something bad is going to happen, fight or flight. So anyway, I was left with a choice: either conquer this feeling, or develop defensive detachment all over again and be defensive and nasty to those guys the next time I see them, and, in turn, rebuild one of the cornerstones of my SSA. I decided to conquer the feeling. I'm now looking at it realistically. For example, exactly what could they have done which would not make me feel inferior and rejected? If I had my own way, would I have them sit me down, put their arm around me, and pay all their attention to me? Would I have them say, "Oh, yes, Jake, we accept you totally and think you're great," or have them say, "Oh, we really like you, please be our friend"? Basically, I would have them put me as the center of attention. That's a very self-centered and infantile want, is it not? Pay all your attention to me is the real desire at the root of all this. Originally that's what it was all about, anyway. I was a lonely teenager who wanted attention and affection, and when I didn't get what I wanted, my inner child basically turned around and said, in protest, "It's not fair. You won't give me what I want, I hate you. You make me feel hurt, and I don't want anything to do with you anymore." And ever since then I've been defensive, and at times, nasty and antisocial. So next time I see them, instead of silently protesting that they aren't paying all their attention to me, I'll try to look at things realistically and be on equal terms with them. I should try and consider how I can be nice to them, and see what responsibilities I have in the social setting, instead of expecting others to pay attention to poor little me. It will be interesting to see how well I manage to conquer this. Tell a friend. Well, it's been a little while since I told my two ever-straight buddies about my SSA and therapy. And they have continued to take it well. I did think that one of them had stopped talking to me, however, I was just being paranoid. You see, I had sent him a couple of text messages and rang him a few times, all without reply. It turns out, though, that he's only got 3 pence worth of credit on his phone, and when I rang him he was in the cinema. So anyways, he managed to call me today just to apologize for not getting back to me sooner. Apart from my own paranoia, it seems my buddies have taken this very well. This brings me to something quite bizarre that happened to me on Saturday. I was at the house of my mentor, and there was a few people around for a social get-together, with mixed ages, etc. This included that guy I talked about whom I was in awe of when my masculinity was at a low ebb. Well, everyone was sitting in the living room talking about various things, and for some reason the subject of homosexuality came up, but the subject was talked about for what must have been a good 15 minutes, but it felt like an hour. But they weren't talking about it in general, they were discussing things like, is it genetic? Can it be changed? Do some people change, etc., etc. I couldn't believe it. I was sitting there completely gobsmacked. What was even more remarkable was how their view seemed to corroborate with my own, about it being primarily environmental and changeable. I started to go all red in the face and my heart started beating really fast. I knew I should keep quiet, because if I had started to participate in the conversation I knew I'd end up coming out to everyone. So I kept my mouth shut. So that was quite amazing. The other thing that was good is how the guy I was in awe of was really friendly to me, talked to me for a while, and even invited me to go out for a drink sometime with him and a bunch of his buddies. Yikes! That was quite a night. I was scared to death, of course, but it felt pretty good. Smiley face. Why does he like me? Recently I've been putting in a lot of effort to get to know different guys and make some new friends. I've been particularly trying to befriend guys who make me feel inferior in some way, e.g. they're all man and I'm nothing in comparison. Anyway, I've been having some success with this. However, something strange has happened that I did not expect. One of these, straight, guys has started being friendly to me and actively trying to get to know me. I mean, this guy is quite attractive, and was the last person I ever thought that I could get to know well. I never thought he would want to know me. So it's like this, every time I see him he's really friendly towards me, eh? Calls me by my nickname, Woo, and talks of inviting me out on social occasions, WTF. This is all great, and I should be pleased, but I can't help thinking, why the hell does he want to show an interest in me? I just can't comprehend it. The other day when he said hello to me he patted his hand on my shoulder, and I was just thinking, what the hell are you doing, and I must have had a puzzled look on my face. It's not that I didn't understand what he was doing, I just cannot understand why he would want to do that to me. I felt like asking, why are you doing this? You're supposed to be ignoring me. That's the way it works, you're breaking the rules. I'm definitely not used to have anyone take an interest in me, especially another member of my peer group. The problem is that when he tries to start a conversation with me, I just don't know what to say. I'm too busy thinking, why the hell is he even talking to me, what does he want? Don't misunderstand, it's not like I actually suspect he has ulterior motives. It's nothing like that. I just cannot understand why this is happening, and I'm totally confounded as to what to do next. I just don't know how to make friends with straight men. What do I do next? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to not do? It's all a mystery to me. I fear that if I don't do things right I may lose this opportunity. Is this to do with trust? Am I having difficulty trusting him, and opening myself up to allow him to be my friend? Is this because I've been hurt by other guys before? To be honest, I'm feeling so mixed up with all sorts of emotions that I have no idea what to do. I've asked my ex-gay support group what they think, so hopefully I'll piece it together. Smiley face. Good advice. My ex-gay support group gave me some really good things to think about concerning what I said in my previous entry. Said 1, in part, he likes you because he sees a man that is real, authentic, and oozes masculinity, and yes, I do believe that it does come down to trust. I had forgotten about this. I suppose when that guy looks at me, he doesn't see my insecurities or anything, but only what I look like on the outside. Which, I suppose, is quite masculine. Sometimes I can even look like a bit of a thug. He continues, I know for me when men started paying attention to me and wanting to be my friend for no other reason than just because they like being around me and not for sex, it really freaked me out to start with. So it's good to know that I'm not the only person to have felt this way. What another guy also said helped a lot, just be yourself. They just want to get to know you. Maybe you seem real, seem friendly, since you have been trying to cultivate friendships, that seems kind of natural. Practice just being you. You asked for it by reaching beyond your normal boundaries, and now by gosh some of these guys like you, oh my. That made me chuckle a bit because he hit the nail right on the head. He added, remember that you are just as good a man in everything as those guys you are meeting. You have nothing to prove to yourself or to these lads. I knew my ex-gay group would help me a lot, and they have, once again. So, I've been trying to take their advice, and I think I've started to see things more realistically. I haven't been feeling so desperate to win attention and feel devastated if I don't get the attention from other guys I need. And keeping in mind that I'm not so hopelessly inferior to them is making things less frightening and helping me see that I'm not so different from those guys after all. In other news, about that strange bloke, Dr. Phil, an American TV doctor. From the few minutes I've endured of watching his god-awful show, I could tell that he was a bit of an idiot who oversimplified things, taking the easiest and most popular route. So it's not a surprise to learn that he can't tell his ass from his elbows when it comes to the origins of homosexuality. Choice? Today I'd like to talk about the idea that homosexuality is a choice. There seems to be much confusion about this issue. Firstly, you have the persons who say homosexuality is a choice, but they mean the lifestyle, and not the feelings. Secondly, you have the persons who say homosexuality is a choice, but they mean that the lifestyle and feelings are both choices. This stirs up much confusion and misunderstandings. For example, some ex-gays who have an exclusively religious approach to change, claim they are no longer gay but are now straight. Of course, what they really mean to say is that they no longer lead a gay lifestyle, they still have the feelings, but just ignore them. Hence, if a person who claimed to be straight suddenly gives into his gay impulses, it looks like the whole ex-gay movement is a sham. But, as I said, this person's feelings never changed in the first place. He was never really straight. So I'd like to try and clear up a few things. Firstly, and most importantly, I'd like to consider for a moment whether the feelings are a matter of choice. I don't believe developing gay feelings is a choice. I never wanted to develop such feelings. After all, who would? As Jason Chanciotto, a gay rights activist, says, that anybody would choose to be gay in light of all the evidence showing how difficult it is to be gay. Is preposterous. I agree. Starting to feel that way is hardly a matter of choice. It just happens, and at the time you don't know why. What is a choice, however, is whether one wants to act upon such feelings, and whether one wants to treat such feelings in psychotherapy. They are the choices one has. Part of the confusion in this matter is caused by the use of labels. When someone says gay or homosexuality, there is uncertainty of exactly what they mean. Do they mean feelings or lifestyle? That's why it is better to use the phrase same-sex attractions, SSA. There is no confusion when one uses that. Nobody chooses to have same-sex attractions. However, you can choose whether to act upon your same-sex attractions, or to treat it with reparative and gender affirmation therapies in order to develop heterosexual attractions. There you go. Now that cannot be misunderstood, can it? Basics of footy today. A buddy of mine finally agreed to show me the basics of football, i.e. soccer, and have a kickabout with me in the park, just showing me the basics. I'd like to say that I felt a huge surge of masculine identity and confidence, but I didn't. I didn't expect to, though. Kicking a ball about quietly with one friend whom you know very well is hardly challenging, is it? This is not the challenging part. The part that will really bring out all of the morbid fears, and rewards for conquering those fears, will be when I play in a 5-a-side game or whatever. I can't wait to have the same confidence as the other guys I've been observing over the years. If only I could be as rowdy as them, to be as tough as them, to be as accepted as they are, how good that would be. The more I think about it, and the more I look back on my life while growing up, the more and more I can see just how much I actually missed out on in regards to masculine identification. There were just so many things I never did, so many things I was never told, and so many things that a father should do with his son that he never did with me. I've missed out on so much. So, being confident enough to hang out with guys who play sports is a great step in the right direction. Instead of looking on such guys with morbid fear, and feeling hopelessly different, i.e. inferior, I can approach such situations with confidence, and hope that in turn I can make genuine friends and receive male affirmation that I've been denied until now. But anyway, that's a long way off. It's all done in small steps. I'm just learning how to kick the ball and not look like a complete prat when I run, which apparently I did, so says my friend. There is one small bit of progress that I have made today. I stopped feeling sick and nervous after a little while when playing footy today. I wasn't left shaking and trembling from the experience, which I usually am when talking about football. It's all in small steps. Or anyways, some good news on the SSA front. Firstly, my efforts to make more genuine male friends seems to be going very well. That guy whom I mentioned in an earlier post, who I was in awe of, has gotten to know me a bit better, and I him. And what I've found out is rather remarkable. I can see now that this mysterious male really is hardly any different from myself. It turns out that many of the things I've been into, or still are into, he is also. So instead of me feeling like my life and personality are hopelessly immature and inferior to those of real men, I've been shown that in fact, no, I am not inferior at all. I really am just a typical young man like he is. I don't have the skill in the English language to convey just how much this meant to me. Other guys who are undergoing therapy could understand. Imagine a guy who you regard as the most manly and mysterious man you know befriending you, making an effort to get to know you, and then you discover that you're really not all that much different from him. It's strange. It's not so much a case of gaining much male affirmation, but rather a case of having your eyes opened and realizing just how daft your previous inferiority complex was. I'm now coming to the conclusion that family dynamics hasn't played as much of a significant role in my SSA as I had thought formerly. Now I'm making more male friends, identifying more as a male, and solving my other problems. I can see that my family only set me up for SSA, rather than caused it. It was other factors, primarily peer relationships, that triggered my SSA. In yet other news, I've hitting more milestones in my change efforts. I've had a few firsts. One was the first time I was looking at and talking to a girl I'd just met from the perspective of wondering if she'd like to go out with me. I even surprised myself a little. Defensive detachment. Again, I still have this problem of feeling utterly rejected by other men at the slightest little thing. Like yesterday, I was in a situation where I spoke to a few guys I knew. That was all positive and there were no issues there, but with some guys, especially older ones, I felt like I had to get every single word I say correct. I cannot allow myself to stumble in speech and make mistakes, and if they don't show enough interest in me, I would feel utterly devastated. There have been times when I've felt like I'm in a pit of despair and utterly stupid and worthless after having tried talking to some guys, despite nothing really having gone wrong. Anyways, so after that yesterday I decided to read up a bit on defensive detachment in Dr. Joseph Nicolos's books. One of things I read was this: the homosexual's hurtful relationship with father, or another significant male figure, results in defensive detachment, which is carried over to relationships with other men. I've read that before, obviously, but it made me ask myself the following question: what similarities are there between my feelings of rejection by my father and my feelings of rejection by my male acquaintances? After thinking about it for a few minutes, I suddenly realized there are two surprisingly obvious similarities. Firstly, whenever I have to go up to my dad and talk to him about some matter, I'm always a little anxious about getting every word I say right. He stands there, staring at me, just waiting for me to stumble in my words so he can jump in and criticize me, or give me a look as if to say, well, come on then. Hurry up. Get on with it, and make me feel stupid. Because he does that, it actually causes me to stumble with my words because I become so self-conscious of what I'm saying and how I say it. This has been a major problem for me in talking to my dad over the years. You must get what you're saying perfectly right, or he jumps on you and gives you a nasty look as if to say, you're just wasting my time. Secondly, when talking to my dad, he has the very irritating habit of just walking out of the room while you're talking, even in the middle of a sentence. I can't tell you how difficult it was as a child trying to get attention from that bastard, when he just gives you a critical look for not speaking quickly enough, and then just walks away because he's simply not interested in whatever you're saying. It was quite hurtful as well. Can you imagine what it's like going up to your dad with a problem while he's watching TV, and then instead of him talking back to you, he just gets up and walks out of the room while you're still speaking, goes into another room and switches the TV on in there instead? I suppose I'm carrying those experiences around with me when I try to speak to other guys, particularly those a little older than me. I'm shaking inside and I expect them to reject me. I'm still trying not to stumble in my words, practicing what I'm going to say, and then being so anxious that I do get things wrong when speaking. I feel as though they are looking at me and waiting for me to choke. If I don't receive some sort of affirmation or assurance, I feel utterly devastated afterwards, even if things didn't go too badly. I'm constantly thinking that guys won't like me or I'm not good enough to hold their interest. Of course, those experiences with my dad aren't the whole story. It wouldn't have mattered so much if other guys whom I had tried to get to know didn't do the exact same things to me, reject me, ignore me, and make me feel inferior. I suppose, then, my dad had simply prepared me for developing defensive detachment, but it was my peers and other men that laid the cornerstone. I guess what I'm currently doing, having an older guy mentor me, and making new friends among my male peers, is slowly undermining that cornerstone in my SSA.